Hi there, it's the Glasgow Girl, and thanks for tuning in again. Today I'm going to talk about some Scottish customs and superstitions. I've got to tell you that I didn't even realise how superstitious we Scots are until I moved over here and one of my American friends pointed it out to me. In my defence, I suppose it was just such a normal part of my everyday life in Scotland while growing up there that I simply didn't question it. But now that it's been pointed out, I've got to agree with my friend, we are a superstitious lot. So join me today on a whistle-stop tour of the life of a superstitious Scot. The obvious place to start is with birth. And remember that these traditions originated in the days when healthcare wasn't as advanced or as available as it is now. There was a high rate of infant mortality. Many children perished from diseases that are easily treated today. If all of those perils were survived, many young men then moved on to new dangers of war, accidents at work in the coal mines or in fishing vessels, and many young women were lost during childbirth itself. So against that backdrop, it's easy to see why the common theory developed that precautions must be taken to ensure the continuation of family lines. It was believed that childbirth created a crack in time, which left the moment open to evil influences. So it followed that objects that may absorb evil were removed from the house, including animals. Remember that most births took place in the homes, and it wasn't until the 70s that fathers started to actually attend the births of their offspring. Up until then, that whole business was considered to be the responsibility of the womenfolk. So they came up with ideas such as covering mirrors in case the baby's image was stolen by evil forces. They even got involved in what preceded birth by ensuring that fertility was encouraged. A willow branch was placed under the marital bed, rice was thrown and knots untied to make sure nothing restricted fertility. An about-to-be-wed female was presented with a chamber pot filled with salt and a small doll placed in it. And yes, I have attended hen nights where we did just that. When the child was safely delivered, many more rituals had to be observed. Please excuse my dog who is making an awful racket right under my feet. Can you be quiet, please? Thank you. Okay, let me try that part again. And the dog's going to try his part again. Lay down, please. Good boy. Okay, attempt number 3 on this one. When the child was safely delivered, many more rituals had to be observed to ensure that evil spirits did not enter such a vulnerable small being. These included all hair and nail clippings for the first year of life having to be collected and burned to prevent them from being stolen by fairies who worked for the devil. But bear in mind this was pretty easy to do as most homes had open fires burning to heat them, so it wasn't quite as strange as it may at first sound. No one was doing this at a barbecue while grilling a few burgers. So assuming your child survived to adulthood, let's now look at the next major life stage, marriage. I mentioned a hen night earlier, and that term describes an evening out for the bride-to-be with all her female friends. Usually occurs about a week before the big day. The male equivalent is known as a stag night, and they can include some pretty weird customs which vary depending on the geographical area. But they all have the same basic theme, and that is the groom-to-be being stripped of all his clothes by his friends. Then he would literally be tarred and feathered, or covered in flour, or soot, or even boot polish, basically anything really messy. Or a version that was extremely popular in my home city was to tie the poor naked guy to a lamppost or some park railings and simply leave him there until some kind passerby freed him. The police used to play that role quite frequently on a Friday night in Glasgow city centre. And needless to say, the starting point of the stag night was a local alehouse where all involved in the ritual had enjoyed a good skinful of adult beverages before moving on to part 2. So we'll move swiftly on to the big day itself. The bride's father and the groom both throw coins out of their vehicles on the way to the ceremony, and kids come from near and far when there's a wedding to position themselves on the sidewalks and catch the coins. It's known as a scramble, and I must admit I participated in many of them when I was a wee lass. Made quite a lot of money that way too. After the ceremony, the bride's father would throw a horseshoe behind the newlywed couple to symbolise the transfer of responsibility of his daughter from him to her husband. I notice that decorative horseshoes are still present in today's modern weddings, but I'm betting that the feminist movement don't know the origins of this particular tradition. Another popular ritual is one that I observe after I've married couples here in the US using the traditional Celtic handfasting ceremony, yes, just like they did in the movie Braveheart. That ritual is called jumping the broom, and after the vows have been exchanged and I've officially declared them to be married, I place a ceremonial broom on the floor and invite the couple to hold hands and jump over it. This symbolises that they are jumping into their new life together. Now, the last wedding tradition that I'll talk about today concerns single ladies attending their friends' weddings. They would save a piece of the wedding cake and sleep with it under their pillows in the hopes that they would dream that night of their future husbands. Something that I still do when cooking, even all these miles away from a Scottish kitchen, is throw some salt over my left shoulder. It greatly amuses my American friends, but it's expected and I would be questioned if I didn't do it if I was cooking back in Scotland. Likewise, if I accidentally put a garment on back to front or inside out, I have to immediately change it for a completely different garment, or else I'll have bad luck that day. What can I say? Old habits die hard. So now, having talked about birth through to marriage, it leaves the final stage of life to look at, and it turns full circle with the same concerns regarding the influence of evil spirits that surrounded childbirth. They're also a major concern at the end of life. I will say that not all of these traditions are still carried out in today's modern world, but I certainly recall quite a few of them being observed when I was growing up, even though I wasn't really aware of the full story behind them as a child. So let's look at some of them. If the patient showed signs of being in the deed thraws, that's a Scottish term, but if they were dying slowly, there was fear that an evil spirit was working within them, and every lock in the house had to be opened to allow the spirit to escape. If a pet dog refused to approach an ill person, that was seen as the end being near, since dogs were thought to possess the ability to sense such things. Likewise, if the dog barked 3 times, this was seen as a signal that death was near, and could only be prevented if a stone was thrown after the first bark. Before an expected death occurred, all animals had to be removed from the room, as it was feared that the evil forces could inhabit the animal's body and harm the corpse. And it was absolutely imperative to prevent a dog from jumping over the corpse, since this could allow the devil to control its spirit. When the person passed away, it was customary for the clocks in the house to be stopped and all the mirrors to be covered to prevent the spirit from going in the wrong direction. Curtains and blinds had to be closed and fires put out. Then all the windows and doors were opened so as not to prevent the fleeing spirit's departure. If the eyes were open, this was seen as the departing soul looking for a companion, so coins were placed over them. Socks and shoes were placed on the deceased feet to assist them walking across the thorny path on which it now had to travel. If a man was walking down the street and a funeral procession passed, he was required to take off his hat and follow it for a bit to ward off his own imminent demise. Catholic priests walking with the funeral procession would stop at each intersection and ask, "Who will give me money for the sake of this man's soul?" Protestant ministers were also given a monetary gift from the deceased person's estate. And undertakers who have to collect the deceased from hospitals customarily give the porter £1, and this is actually detailed on the invoice. So there you have it, a look at some of the things that I must admit look rather odd even to me now. We're going to end with our Scottish word of the day, and this one is related to the weather. The word is smirrin, and it means a very light drizzle of rainfall. Commonly heard when I was growing up and heading out to play with my pals. Take a jacket with you, it's smirrin' already. I hope you've enjoyed listening, and we'll tune in again next time. Cheerio the noo!